So good morning or good afternoon, depending where you're tuning in from today, and welcome to our September webinar series brought to you by CPS HR Consulting, your partner for HR in the public sector. In today's webinar, we'll take a deep dive into engaging your Hispanic workforce, presented by Jose Gonzalez, Senior Consultant at CPS HR. Before we kickstart this session, I just have some quick housekeeping notes as usual. This webinar is being recorded and will be accessible for replay. We will post the recording on YouTube and the CPS HR webinar webpage for your convenience. All attendees will be in listen-only mode to ensure the best audio quality for everybody. Please feel free to use the chat feature to engage in conversation and share your thoughts with one another. If a question pops up during the webinar, don't shy away. Use the Q&A feature to send it in, and we'll tackle as many questions as we can towards the end of the webinar, time permitting. Now, without further delay, I'm going to hand it over to Jose to enlighten us on employee engagement today. Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Jose Gonzalez. I am a senior HR consultant at CPS HR. Before I start diving into the content, I do want to give you a few more details about who I am because I think it provides good context on the different things that I'll be covering within the presentation. So I joined CPS HR over a year and a half ago. And before joining CPS HR, my background is in human resources. So I held a few HR roles in school district settings in the state of California, as well as I have some experience in municipal government HR as well. That's a little bit about me. Let's start talking a little bit about who CPS HR is. So CPS HR, we're a self-supporting independent government agency. We offer a full range of integrated HR solutions. I do want to repeat that. CPS HR is an independent government organization in the state of California. We're viewed the same as any other city or county organization within the state. And we offer it all. So CPS HR has it all. We have class and comp, we have employee engagement, DEI programs, executive recruitment. That's just a little bit about CPS HR. My particular division is the Institute for Public Sector Employee Engagement. It is a division of CPS HR. Our mission is to help the public sector measure and improve employee engagement. So goals for today. We're going to start off by defining to understand what employee engagement is. Employee engagement definitely has a unique offering to the different positions and the organizations that we find in the public sector. So I'll be covering that in the next few slides. I will also review some BLS data. So that is the Bureau of Labor Statistics on the Hispanic and Latino workforce to really paint the picture of what's going on nationwide in terms of the Hispanic and Latino workforce. Next, we'll be looking at how we view employee engagement at CPS HR. So when I'm working with organizations, how do I view employee engagement? What process do I use? How do we measure it? I just want to put it in front there already. I do have a bias for surveys. Surveys are definitely number one. And you'll see that coming across throughout the presentation. But I do offer some alternative routes for engagement, which I'll be covering towards the end of the presentation itself. We'll also review some of the data that we obtain from our national poll. So every other year, we conduct a national poll on our end, and you'll be provided with a few more details about what that means in just a little bit. Next, I will go over some best practices for surveys and employee engagement. And throughout the whole presentation itself, I do have a number of polls and some bonus information that I'll be including towards the end of the presentation. So please stick around for that bonus information. Everyone loves bonuses, right? So please stick around towards the end of that presentation. You'll receive those bonuses. So we start with understanding what employee engagement is. So we derive a lot of inspiration from the federal government. What you're seeing here on this slide, the United States Merit Systems Protection Board defines employee engagement as a heightened connection between the employee and their organization. Whenever I'm thinking about employee engagement, to really get a full understanding of what's going on, I do like to look at the different components that go into employee engagement. So when we see employee engagement, when there is employee engagement within employees, what we tend to see is that there's a lot more personal meaning and pride attached to the day-to-day work, as well as an employee's relationship to the organization that they work for. We also see this very neat thing occurring when there is an increase in employee engagement, and that is discretionary effort. So that is going above and beyond to ensure that the organization is fulfilling its duties, that the organization has a good reputation and whatnot. So really, employee engagement goes beyond job satisfaction. It's not just coming in, day out, clocking in and clocking out just to get a paycheck. There are a lot more components involved when we have employee engagement. Now, I mentioned this in our introduction, but in the public sector itself, employee engagement has a very unique offering, because if we think about the different roles that we find in the public sector, and some of the roles are listed here in this particular slide. So think about the roles in public safety, public health, right? We just came out of a pandemic, and there was a lot of public servants working to ensure that we're keeping the public safe within a pandemic. Education, we're thinking about teachers, utilities, water, wastewater, electricity, streets and maintenance, public works, all the other support roles that we find within a local government, a county government, or any other government, whether it be state or federal. You can paint the picture of how important employee engagement would be in that, right? When you have discretionary effort, when you have personal meaning and pride attached to day-to-day work, what ends up happening is not only does that organization look good, but we also see benefits, right, bleeding through for the community it serves. So if we think about a city government, you have discretionary effort and public safety employees. Just imagine the amount of benefit that that community would receive when their police officers, their fire department go above and beyond to ensure that the community's needs are being met. So just a quick poll. The question is, does your organization have an employee engagement program? I give you 3 options: yes, no, and don't know. And that did just pop up here. I will mention that a lot of the images that you'll see within these slides were created with the help of DALL-E or ChatGPT. If you haven't already used it, you definitely should. It creates very interesting images. But what you're seeing here is what I asked it to do. So here's the description that ChatGPT gave us. Here's the illustration of a vibrant office setting depicting employee engagement. Captures teamwork, collaboration, and motivation in a modern and lively environment. So pretty neat thing. Definitely looks pretty lively there. I love how there's a lot of plants in there and whatnot to really set the ambiance, right? Okay, so it looks like we're pretty torn on whether or not some organizations have it and some don't. By and large, the large amount of participants that are in the webinar today, 43% stated that yes, their organization does have an employee engagement program. 32% said no, and then 25% said don't know. So very good information. Thank you for participating in that poll. We're going to keep on moving on. So next in the section that I have here in the presentation, we're going to look at data that I obtained from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Really, this is painting the picture of how the Hispanic or Latino workforce has grown since the 1990s is the reference point that they include here. So in 1990, we see 10.7 million Hispanic workers in the labor force. In 2030, it's projected to be 35.9. So again, a steady increase through the decades until 2030. That steady increase translates into a greater proportion that we see within the workforce, right? So for Latinos, Hispanic Latinos in the 1990s, The share that they had represented within the labor force was 8.5%. In 2030, it's projected to be 21.2%. So what that means is that what the Bureau of Labor Statistics is projecting is that Hispanics or Latinos will make up 1 out of every 5 employees that are in the labor force. So as you can imagine, that number is still going to continue to move up. If we start setting up things in our organization that tailor fit to Hispanic or Latino population, really we're ahead of the curve at this time, because come 2030, 1 in 5 workers will be Hispanic or Latino. One more slide from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Hispanic workers or Hispanic Latino workers are on average younger than all other workers within the United States. This is important to note because later on in the presentation, I will be talking about lived experiences and how that translates over to the Hispanic Latino population as well. So just keep that in mind. On average, Hispanic or Latino workers are younger than all other workers within the United States. So next poll question, Hispanic Heritage Month. What day does Hispanic Heritage Month begin? We have 4 options here: September 1st, September 15th, October 15th, or don't know. Again, we have another nice image here from that was generated from ChatGPT, but I'll save that description for the next poll that we'll have later on in the presentation. All right, I'm starting to see some responses come through. Okay, nice. All right. So thank you everyone again for participating in that poll. The large majority of people are correct. It does start on September 15th. So Hispanic heritage has some roots since the 1968. It used to be 1 week long. It was extended into a month through the United States government and whatnot. The 30-day period, actually, within that 30-day period, we have a lot of Independence Days for Latin American countries. So Mexico is one of them, Honduras, Salvador. All of those Latino countries did receive independence within the time period of September 15th through October 15th. Hence the reason why it is within this month. Thank you everyone again for participating in that poll. We'll continue moving forward with the content of the webinar. And so the next section is employee engagement by CPS HR. So this is how we view employee engagement at CPS HR when I'm working with organizations. This is the process that we outline. We really view employee engagement as a process. So we have a very well-defined 5-step process. So step 1, plan and set goals. Step 2, survey employees. Again, I put that out there in the beginning. I do love surveys. I think that there's a lot of benefits to that, and I'll actually go over that in the next few slides. After we conduct the survey, we analyze and share results. Once that's done, we formulate a roadmap or a plan to take action on the results that we did obtain. And then the 5th step is evaluate actions and sustain engagement. Now, even though you're seeing it as a chronological 5-step process, really at the tail end of that 5-step, at the 5th step, you should be returning back to that 1st step. So we always recommend organizations employee engagement is an ongoing process. It doesn't stop with just a survey. We're not trying to just tick boxes here. We're trying to make it be a continuous process for the organization itself. So why a survey? Again, I'm very biased towards surveys themselves, but here are just a few benefits. Surveys are efficient and inclusive. They typically yield consistent data. With surveys, we're able to put measures into place to ensure that responses are confidential. And the most important thing that I believe, the most important benefit that you obtain from surveys is that you have the ability to compare results with benchmarks. So what that means is that when we work with organizations, we set up not only an internal benchmark. So one example of this is working with a city. What we will do is we will have a benchmark, a city overall benchmark, where each of the different departments within the city can compare their results over to the city overall. And as you can imagine, that provides a lot of rich information to see how different departments are performing when you compare them to the city overall. Those are just examples of internal benchmarks. We also have national benchmarks. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier. We're going to get into a few more details about what it is. But at CPS HR, we conduct a national poll every other year. We've been doing that since 2016. My next slide will cover that. But before I move on to that next slide, I do want to just name different avenues of obtaining or measuring employee engagement. Some of these avenues might be focus groups. They might be one-on-one meetings with employees. You could still get some information to see where employees are in employee engagement. What pain points might they have? Is it pay and benefits? Is it their relationship with supervisors, etc.? You're still able to do that with these methods, such as focus groups and one-on-one department or one-on-one meetings with employees. However, what we tend to find is that a survey just casts a greater net throughout the organization. Because it's sent online, there might be a paper survey as well, but because it's sent out to all employees, the amount of information that you receive is just a lot greater and can be a lot more standardized as well. Focus groups, you might have some guiding questions, but a discussion might go one way or the other, depending on what department you're interviewing or what topic is going on within that department on that particular day. So CPS HR's national poll, I did mention this a little bit earlier. We've been doing this since 2016. The national poll is, we have a sample that's designed to represent the US workforce. And from there, we obtain data that lets us know how are engagement levels within the private sector? How are they in the government sector? What about in each level of government? How does engagement look like in the federal, state, and local government? So all of these are created. We create benchmarks for organizations to compare their scores to. So whether it's a state organization or a local government organization, they do have our national poll that they could reference with. So from our national poll, just some key takeaways here. From our national poll, what we see is that engagement in the workplace, fully engaged employees, benefits to that. Fully engaged employees tend to report good or very good physical health. They tend to report good or very good mental health. So there are some benefits to having higher levels of engagement within an organization on an employee level. On the right-hand side of this particular slide, you're seeing benefits that occur with employee engagement on an organizational level. So fully engaged employees are more tied to the mission success of an organization. They tend to say that they will intend to stay within their organization as well. And as you can imagine, if you have that dedication to the mission success, if you intend to stay as well, you can imagine what kind of dividends that will create for organizational performance. Now, this isn't a causal relationship, right? We're looking at correlations here and whatnot. So take it with a grain of salt, but this is what our data tells us, what the benefits are of having employee engagement in the organization or in the workplace. So key driver analysis from our poll, once again, we run a statistical analysis on our end to see which questions have the most influence on employee engagement. And what we tend to find when we're working with organizations, when we conduct our national poll, these two particular questions keep on coming into the focus. So first one is, I feel valued for the work that I do. Second question is, I feel like I belong here. As you can imagine, I'm trying to draw parallels here, right? You have the Hispanic and Latino workforce. It's continuing to increase in the United States. We know what the key drivers of employee engagement are, right? They're seated in these two questions. I feel valued for the work that I do. I feel like I belong here. So the next section, we're going to talk about some do's and don'ts, maybe for those organizations that don't have currently an employee engagement program within their organization. It is biased towards hoping that or motivating you to maybe start running a survey within your organization itself. So here are some tips and tricks. In terms of survey content, we do recommend that you add categories as well as demographic questions. So categories, through our research, these are the different things that would impact employee engagement. So resource and workload. Do employees have the tools required in order to fulfill their duties? Are duties clearly defined? Pay and benefits, it doesn't really need an introduction, right? Do employees feel as if they're being paid fairly for the work that they're doing is one of the key takeaways. The organization's mission, do employees know about the mission, the values that an organization stands for? Has that been communicated well? And do employees feel like their work is contributing to the mission of the organization? My team, some key takeaways from there. Do team members or do employees feel like their team cooperates to get their job done? That's just one example of questions that would be asked in the My Team section. My supervisor, do employees feel like their supervisor is available when they need them? Do they feel as if their performance is fairly evaluated? Those are just some key takeaways from that particular category. And finally, leadership and managing change. Do employees feel that managers or senior leaders are visible? Do they feel that the direction of the organization itself is headed in a positive direction? Those are just two key takeaways from that particular category. There are some examples here about demographic questions as well. So gender, age, race and ethnicity, department and work group. Really what we try to see on our end when we're running surveys is, are there major differences between the different demographic groups that exist within an organization? How does employee engagement look for males versus females and all other genders within an organization? That's really what we're trying to do with these demographic questions. So some don'ts. When it comes to surveys and follow-up, this is what I recommend. So some don'ts, don't just survey. There should be some action that's taken after a survey is taken. The really bad position an organization can put themselves in is getting all this traction, getting all this attention about a survey that's coming up, asking employees to take 10, 15 minutes out of their day to obtain that information or to provide that feedback, and then nothing happens after a survey is administered. So don't put yourself into that situation. There should be some action that is taken from the results of the survey on the tail end whenever you are administering surveys. The next one is don't get discouraged with initial low response rates. So this is particularly true for those organizations that maybe don't have an employee engagement program embedded within their organization already. So usually what happens is that for that first initial rollout, response rates are pretty low. They might be in the 30%. They might be lower than that, right? Depending on the size of the organization itself. So usually for that initial rollout, you're building traction. You're letting employees know what your intent is and whatnot. There might be some skepticism that might be contributing to low response rates, but don't get discouraged with that first initial low response rate. Lastly, my recommendation is don't skip on confidentiality. So consider having a third party administer that survey. So CPS HR, we do administer surveys for organizations. That isn't the end all be all. You can run a survey internally within the organization. But if you do that, please be very clear about who has access to responses and whatnot. Also, on the similar note for confidentiality, don't go in and start slicing data in a way that might reveal a respondent's identity. So one of the things that we do on our end is usually if we have 10 or more responses for a demographic group, that's when we will provide comprehensive analysis for that particular demographic group. Anything lower than that 10 or more responses usually won't receive comprehensive analysis, and that's done really to protect confidentiality of those smaller groups within an organization. So next, in particular, when you're running surveys, trying to tailor fit it to the Hispanic or Latino population, some considerations for the survey that you can take. Consider adding additional options for race and ethnicity identification. What we do on our end is we mirror whatever the US Census Bureau is doing. In 2020, that was the last time that the Census Bureau held their survey on their end. They've made some changes for the 2030, which will be coming up pretty soon here in the next 6 years, right? But this is just a preview of how race and ethnicity will be within the 2030 census. So as you can see on this particular slide, for that Hispanic or Latino category, there's different levels now that a respondent can take. So it's not just Hispanic, Latino, it doesn't just stop there. Folks are able to select a nationality that more closely aligns to how they view themselves. So Mexican, Cuban, Puerto Rican, Dominican, all of that is available to respondents, and there is a text box on there as well in case someone would like to fill in additional details. So really the goal here is to have representation. There is room to provide additional details if a respondent would like. Now, I did mention it a little bit earlier, don't start slicing and dicing data in a way that might reveal personally identifiable information. So this part or this layout for a question might work for larger organizations that might have 20, 30 more employees within the Hispanic or Latino workforce or within the demographic group at the organization, but it might not work for smaller organizations, right? If we're talking about an organization that's only 50 folks, right, or 50 employees, going down to this level of detail might not be the best thing. Or if you do go down to that level, not having comprehensive analysis that was tied to that in order to protect confidentiality. So some additional do's for the Hispanic Latino workforce, some considerations you can take when you're building out a survey for your organization. Consider translating the survey. This has actually been an increase that we see in the organizations that we work with. More and more organizations would like to translate the survey. So here are some recommendations that I make as I'm working with those organizations, as I'm translating surveys on my end. If possible, have your survey system, have that system enable an option for the respondents to toggle between languages. So folks can go into the survey themselves and toggle whether it's English, Spanish, Haitian Creole. Having that ability really provides a lot of power on their end to decide how they're going to take the survey. This kind of segues into my next point, which is, if possible, consult with the Spanish speakers in your organization. What I tend to find in organizations working with different organizations is that Spanish varies. Mexican Spanish is different from Spanish that you might find for Salvadorians or any other Central American Spanish. So terms might be different and whatnot. So take into consideration the current population within your organization, and also take into consideration formal versus informal. Working with professional translating agencies, what tends to happen is that you'll have a professional translation done for a survey, and they will use formal Spanish. I am not the best in Spanish. I can read, write, and speak in Spanish, but my Spanish isn't formal. And usually what formal Spanish is college level or high school level, right? You might be casting a shadow on particular employees who might not be able to read at that level. So take that into consideration as well. When you are translating your survey, make sure that you're tailor-fitting it for your particular organization as well. All right, so the next section, we're getting into the bonus information in terms of engagement and the Hispanic Latino workforce. Before we start diving into that information, another question about Hispanic Heritage Month. So another poll, does your organization recognize Hispanic Heritage Month? So 3 options are given to you: yes, no, or don't know. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but This particular image, when I try to create it using ChatGPT, this is a description that I gave or that they gave me. So here is an illustration representing the Hispanic Latino workforce in a diverse and collaborative environment. Let's see, I see some responses rolling in. Okay. All right, perfect. So it looks like the large majority of organizations, or at least the folks who are attending, their organization does recognize Hispanic Heritage Month. So that's great to see. That's about 50%, 39% stated no, and then 11% stated they don't know. Thank you all for participating in that poll. We'll go ahead and continue on with the information I have in the presentation. Okay, so the next slide, they say, so I bring up this slide because as I was getting content ready for this particular webinar, I was doing research to see what do other organizations say about the Hispanic or Latino workforce. And usually when you start thinking about different demographic groups, you hear this, they say Hispanic Latino workforce values this, or they say this particular demographic group values this, right? For the research that I did do and from what I found, it did resonate with what I have, but that's my lived experience. So don't just think that because you read an article or two, you know exactly how what values a Hispanic Latino worker would have. That's not necessarily the case because lived experiences are different, right? How folks grew up, what their education looks like, whether or not they had one or two parent households, all of that affects the values that a person has. So even though it provides you with some context, that isn't the end all be all. And I caution you that if you're looking for ways to engage your Hispanic or Latino workforce, don't just go off of what an article or two says. Really try to understand by communicating with employees to see what values they might have. But nonetheless, I will go over what I found. So values, familismo, respeto, personalismo. So familismo, what that means is that Hispanic or Latino workers tend to place a great value on family relations. Again, that rings true on my end, might not ring true for all Hispanic or Latino workers. Respeto, this is a respect for hierarchical structures within an organization, so respect for leadership and whatnot. Again, rings true on my end, might not ring true for everyone else. Personalismo, value for personal relationships, especially in the workplace that are professional, where there are face-to-face contact and whatnot. That's something I value. Might not be something that everyone in your organization that is Hispanic or Latino might value. In regards to management and engagement, here are some things that came up. Provide clear leadership, promote personal relationships, promote representation. Those are just some suggestions that they do. But again, I caution you, Hispanic and Latinos have a number of different nationalities, right? We think about Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, Cubans. All of those different nationalities might have a different view of what they value within the workplace. Not only that, lived experiences have to be considered as well. How much education did a person obtain? What do their household looks like? How many brothers and sisters grew up with them? All of that translates into the values that an employee might have when they're working for their organization. So other routes to employee engagements, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. It doesn't just have to be a survey, or if you do happen to run a survey, these are other things that you can do in order to engage employees within the Hispanic or Latino workforce. So top of this list here are employee resource groups. This is something we recommend whenever we have DEI projects, whenever we're doing consulting work for organizations on DEI, right? Building employee resource groups is always a good outlet for those, for specific demographic groups. So some of the examples that I found in my research is Hola at Microsoft. So that is the Hispanic and Latinx Organization of Leaders in Action. Also LEN at Morgan Stanley. So that is Latinx Employee Network. What employee resource groups are really trying to do is they're trying to celebrate the Latinx culture, to ensure that employees feel as if there's a place for them in their organization. It might provide networking opportunities. It might provide tailored support to what employees might be encountering, the issues or the situations that come up while they're doing their day-to-day work. Another thing that you might consider in terms of engagement, all the research that we've done and all the work that we've done with organizations, DEI, and engagement go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. So typically, if you have a DEI program, that does translate into greater levels of engagement. So these are just some acronyms that are going around now. DEI is a little controversial, right? There is some conversations about removing the E and whatnot. I still include that on here though, because it is alive and well for a lot of the organizations that we work with actually. So diversity, equity, inclusion is one of them. If that doesn't suit the needs for your particular organization, consider looking at different abbreviations and different goals within that program. So another example, inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. And finally, connection, belonging, and safety. All these programs might provide additional training opportunities. They might have other opportunities where employees could connect with each other to ensure that they feel represented, that they feel valued, and whatnot. So last, we are getting towards the end of the presentation here. I do mention this, I'm very clearly a millennial, right? I am guilty of spending some time on Instagram, scrolling through reels and whatnot. So what you're seeing here is actually a few weeks ago, I encountered by the almighty knowledge of the algorithm, right? They sent me this particular reel. It's coming from the California Highway Patrol for the state of California. I know we have some folks from out of state as well. So that is our highway patrol in the state. And this particular page was very interesting. It's something that I haven't really encountered before. What's going on within that particular page is that it is a Latino, Hispanic focused Instagram page that posts reels. That particular image that you're seeing there, there's a truck. It has a nice song in the back that's a Latino song that I like. And so just the fact that they combined all those different things, all those different attributes within that reel really caught my attention. I mean, I'm just looking at that truck. I mean, I would love to drive that truck, right? So that's really another route to engagement. Think about the message that it sends to current employees as well as new employees, right? It's not just representation for current employees. It could be a recruitment strategy as well. And by and large, reading this particular description here, it provides viewers the website in order to see what the application is for the CHP or the California Highway Patrol. So that's just a good example of what an organization could do if they're able to create an Instagram, try to reach those millennial populations, right? This reached me. It was pretty successful, and I thought it was pretty interesting. From that same particular account, they also provided, or they created a while back, a video that shows, that basically sets out a lot of examples. What you're seeing here when I pause this particular reel is that we are Latino officers. Of course, we choose pan dulce or traditional sweetbread versus donuts. And then it goes on to other generalizations about the Latino culture. But again, it is one opportunity for you to connect with current employees as well as a recruitment strategy. Very neat to see. So that pretty much concludes all the information I have on my end. We will be opening it up to Q&A in just a little bit. But before I do that, I do want to open it up to Marissa. I believe she has a little bit more information about what happens next within the webinar.
Yes, thank you, Jose, for an enlightening presentation. And thank you again for being here today. So just a few things to note before we get into questions as usual. As a reminder to our attendees, this webinar has been recorded and will be available for replay on the CPS HR YouTube and webinar homepage on our website. So be sure to check it out and share it with your colleagues. While you're there, take a look at our other past webinars as well. At CPS HR Consulting, we are committed to partnering with government and nonprofit organizations. Our suite of services and products range from organizational culture, recruitment, training, test rental, classification and compensation, and so much more. If you're looking to transform your organization, contact us today to see how we can tailor our services to meet your unique needs. Lastly, please take a moment to complete our short survey that will appear after the webinar closes. So thank you in advance for your time and insights. Once again, thank you, Jose, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. Our next webinar is scheduled for October 16th on workplace AI policies, and we hope to see you there. I will post all this information in the chat while we are getting to questions. Jose, I do have one question that popped up. That popped up during our conversation here. It's from Christine. She said, how do you deploy a survey if the entire workforce doesn't have access to computers? Like, do you have any insight on other ways that they may be able to do that?
Yes, at CPS HR, we do provide organizations an opportunity to, it's a paper invitation, it's still online, but when we're thinking about an organization that maybe might not have all the emails and whatnot, that is another avenue. The particular survey, the platform that we use, you can take it not just from a computer, but from smartphones as well. So opening that opportunity for participants or employees to take the survey in different various fashions does help out. So just keeping that, keeping that in mind.
You. There's another question that popped up in the Q&A here. What, in your opinion, what do you think would be the best way to share this information with the supervisor who might be able to benefit from the training? Is there any advice on that at all?
We will definitely provide these slides after the presentation or the webinar is done. So you can provide them with the slides. They might be great, and the recording, right? Because we have a recording. But in our DEI unit, we also have additional training opportunities that you might consider having the supervisor take as well. So that might be generational diversity or cultural intelligence. Lots of different trainings that might be beneficial in that situation.
Thanks, Jose. Here's one. If our organization does not celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, what's a good way to approach this without excluding other groups?
That's a good question. Those employee resource groups are great. Sometimes we receive this particular question. It comes up, right? Well, if one particular demographic group has an employee resource group, why doesn't other employee resource groups have them, right? And at that point, my response to that is employee resources groups can be set up for any demographic, whether it's single parents, Hispanic or Latinos, or anything like that. That is just an outlet that provides everyone else within the organization also an opportunity to create their own groups.
Thanks, Jose. Hopefully that answers your question. We have another one here. So you mentioned ERGs. Do most organizations use ERGs as focus groups and/or have them work on specific projects, or are they just safe and supportive spaces for employees with common backgrounds?
It varies from organization to organization. But yes, those are two very good ideas. What I've found is that some organizations will empower their ERGs to take up the responsibility of making sure that folks know about, or other employees know about Hispanic Heritage Month or any other opportunities, any other holidays that might come up. So you might consider having them do that, or it could just be a safe space, a space where folks can network and learn about other individuals within the organization that might look like them or might hold the same values as them.
Thanks, Jose. Claudia, at this time, we don't have any webinars focused on ERG scheduled. However, Jose, please take that back to your department and notes, and possibly for our 2025 webinar series, we can add that to our calendar. So thanks for the suggestion, Claudia. Okay, last call for questions. We have some time, so if you do have some, please bring them in. Otherwise, we'll give you some time back in your day today. Leslie, I see your question. I'm answering. I'm just going to answer it out loud here. We don't have any DEI certifications at this time, at least through our training department, but we do offer DEI courses. If you would like to check out the list of courses, you can go to www.cpshr.us. That's our homepage, and look under the training department tab, and you'll be able to see a list of courses. You are welcome. Okay, one more question, Jose. Do you recommend assigning an HR member or an executive team member to an employee resource group?
Yes, definitely. And now the level of oversight that particular, whether it's an HR member or an executive team member, it doesn't have to be anything too obtrusive, right? You want to provide enough flexibility for that ERG to do what it needs to do. But usually what we tend to find is that when an executive team member is assigned to ERGs and whatnot, they're able to advocate for them and get that voice out there even further than what the ERG itself would be able to do. So yes, definitely recommend doing that.
All right, final call for questions. Going once, going twice. All right, I'll call it. So again, thank you, Jose, for being here and for taking the time to do this. Please send me those slides when you can, and I'll get them out to our participants. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to email me, feel to email Jose, and we'll see you next month. Thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, everyone.